And I welcome you all on behalf of IHMA Kerala State Chapter. Today as a speaker we have Dr. Sujata Nayak ma'am. And today's topic is pathophysiology of cough and its homeopathic management. Before starting the session, I would like to thank Dr. Samuel Honeyman sir for giving us such a great system called homeopathy. And I would like to give a brief introduction about Sujata Nayak ma'am. Dr. Sujata Nayak, a clinically trained homeopath, has done a graduation from CMP Homeopathy Medical College, Mumbai, and post-graduation in Homeopathic Repertory from Mumbai University. She has been practicing extensively in Mumbai for last 32 years across 3 centers with thousands of patients from India and abroad as well. She is also running a charitable OPD in Konkan region of rural Maharashtra at PKN Valavalkar Hospital for the past 7 years with great success. She has successfully made inroads at grassroots level where homeopathy has been previously unheard of. With a team of passionate homeopaths, Dr. Sujata Nayak has been involved in several research projects, including the one on homeopathic management of chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy. Dr. Sujata Nayak received the Best Oral Presentation Award for her research study on homeopathic treatment of resistant oral candidiasis in patients with cancer at 4th International Conference on Integrative Oncology held at Kochi, Kerala in February 2020. As first international affiliate member of Faculty of Homeopathy, UK, Dr. Sujata Nayak has been invited to hold clinical sessions for general practitioners and homeopaths on various topics including homeopathy for cervical spondylosis and psoriasis. Her talk on work regarding homeopathic treatment of chronic bronchial asthma in community setup at LMHI 2019, Sorrento, Italy was highly revered. The retrospective study on resistant tinea carried out at Rural Hospital was presented by Dr. Sujata Nayak at LMHI 2018, Cape Town, and Faculty of Homeopathy Congress 2018, Liverpool Conferences has been widely appreciated. Dr. Sujata Nayak was awarded the first place for her research poster presentation on PCOS and its homeopathic management at the first International Conference on Alternative Medicine held by Ayush Department in November 2017 at Dubai. Dr. Sujata Nayak is a prolific writer, columnist, orator. Dr. Nayak has been regularly invited as a speaker at various national and international health forums. Her book, Wellness Shots, a compilation of health and wellness tips posted on social media, has been listed by Nation Press in bestseller category. Her latest book, Wellness Capsule, has started gathering very great reviews. Ma'am, it is our privilege to have you in today's session, ma'am. Thanks for accepting the invite.
Thank you very much.
I would also like to introduce a moderator for today's session, Dr. Vineet Siddharthan, sir. So please, sir.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Good evening, Sujata.
Good evening. Good evening.
Actually, today we are very lucky for getting her as a presenter here. We have been together in so many national and international arenas. We've been together, so I know her. What is her caliber and everything. So it's a good time. We have to learn so many things from her. So Sujata, please go on. I'll be here. I will moderate the things. Yeah. So we can make an interactive session, something like that. So if the participants have some queries, you just message and we will clear that in the end.
Okay. Sure.
Okay, Sujata.
Yes.
Yeah. Please.
Right. So, good evening, everybody. Wonderful experience for being with the Kerala chapter of the IHME. A very vibrant group, I believe. And Kerala has been really close to my heart because that's the last that I traveled out of Mumbai. That was in February for the Integrative Oncology Conference. And after that, everything just kind of shut down. So I carry very fond memories of that trip, especially because of the way it culminated into me getting that award. So that is also very special. But all in all, Kerala has been really on the forefront, whether it's education, whether it is tourism, and whether it is homeopathy. So in every way, Kerala has been in the forefront. And now even in this COVID battle, Kerala has shown what we need to do. And if we do things in time, how we can actually avert a major calamity. So cheers to all the Keralites out there, and welcome all the friends who have joined in from whichever part of the world, whichever part of India. Today, the topic that I have chosen, my team and me, we were actually thinking when the invite came to conduct this webinar, I was in two minds whether there were a couple of other topics. People said that now COVID is absolutely hot, so something regarding COVID. But I think it's coming out of everybody's ears and nose and brains now. So instead of directly approaching the webinar with only COVID in mind, I thought let's take up a symptom which is so common and which has so much of nuisance value, whether it's for the patient or for the doctor, and that is cough. And although it seems such a innocuous kind of a symptom, cough, what is there in cough? But as we go by, as we proceed in this lecture, you realize that cough has so many connotations. It can be from being a minor psychogenic disorder to the deepest pathological state. Cough can traverse all these levels. And what is the significance of each kind of cough? How homeopathy can deal with cough in different ways. That is what we are going to see today. So the topic of my discussion, and today joining me on this, first, thank you very much, Vineet, for that wonderful, for being there, and Dr. Vinod for introducing me so well. Thank you very much. And today, screen sharing is being done by my associate, my colleague, my assistant in my research group, Dr. Runali Puri. And I have a team of assistants, and without them, I would have been nothing really. It's a joint effort, it's a team effort. And everything that I'm going to present is a culmination of all the joint effort that we have been taking over this. So Runali is going to do the screen sharing. And the topic of our discussion today is cough, its pathophysiology and its homeopathic approach. I plan to finish the session in 45 minutes to an hour so that we have time for some interaction. Too much of lecturing can get a bit boring. So let's make it interactive. Let me share what I know and let me learn from you also. So let's make it a very open kind of a session. So just going through the preliminaries, what is cough? Cough is actually nothing but a reflex action. It's a protective action of the body to clear our airways of mucus or any kind of irritant or a noxious substance that is there like dust or smoke. And it's a forceful expulsion of air from the lungs that helps us to clear the secretion. So if there is something there, you cough and you try to remove it, that's a completely protective mechanism. So foreign bodies, irritants from the airway, and it can be voluntary or reflex to airway irritant. So you can actually simulate a cough. So you know how, so acting out a cough is much simpler than acting out other pathologies. So it is voluntary and it is also reflex. Now, pathophysiology of cough is, we know the triggers like smoke and perfume, scents, strong irritants, then throat irritation or tickling in the throat, that can also bring on a cough. Fumes, so people working in industrial areas, you know, the noxious effluents from there, those can also irritate the passage. Speech, some people when they talk too much, even they would have a kind of a cough. Exercise can induce cough. Cold, dry air. Eating, some people get worse when they eat something, and we know the kind of cough that comes because of a reflux of the gastroesophageal contents. And humidity. So these are the common causes, common triggers in which could actually lead to a cough. And what happens in this is, Runali, I'd like to go back a bit, please. The earlier slide, yes. So what happens is that the trigger, the noxious influence, when it enters the pharynx or the larynx and goes to the trachea, and then to the lung parenchyma, where the cough is induced. What actually happens is that the cough receptors, which are there, which line the mucus lining of the lung, they will carry these impulses to the cortical center in the brain, where the cough, you're going to get the signal for the cough, the message for the cough. That's how it starts. Next one. Yeah, so you can see this in the cough reflex arc. So you can see the afferent nerves, which actually carry the message from the receptors, the mechanical, chemical receptors of the respiratory tract, of the pericardium, esophagus, the diaphragm, and the stomach. So they carry it to the cough center in the medulla, from where the efferent nerves, the nerves which carry the message from the brain to the muscles, they will carry that message, and then the expiratory muscles of the respiratory tract are going to induce the cough. What we hear as cough is a mechanism which is induced by the expiratory muscles of the respiratory tract. Yeah, next one. So people who join in late can always put a message if they want a brief of what has happened. So in case they feel lost at what has happened, you can just put a message and we can just quickly recap what we have already said. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah. So yeah, this is done. Cough reflex start. We'll go to the next one. Yeah, now what are the causes of cough? Now we know the common causes of cough are infection, most important. What are infection? This is the most common. So whether it's an upper respiratory infection, whether it's a lower respiratory infection, so upper respiratory could be laryngitis, tracheitis, then the bronchitis, alveolitis, pneumonitis, pneumonia. So these are the, and whooping cough, of course, which is very, which is the common thing, the pertussis. So these are the infective causes of cough. And of course, chronic. So this is the acute ones. And in chronic ones, you can have, most important is pulmonary tuberculosis. And a persistent, non-controllable kind of a cough, which goes on for weeks together. First thing you need to rule out, especially in a country like India, is pulmonary tuberculosis. And of course, chronic bronchitis leading to asthma, and bronchiectasis and lung abscess, which is rare, but it is one of the causes for chronic cough. Very often the cough doesn't subside, and then when they do a CT scan, they realize that there has been an abscess which is untreated. And of course, there'll be constitutional symptoms, systemic symptoms also, like a fever which might go with it. And then the other one is the mechanical irritation, inhalation of the dust, especially pneumoconiosis. These are occupational hazards. So people living in damp, cold surroundings where there is no sun, no sunlight, or people living in industrial areas. So you have these occupational hazards which can affect the lung. So here you can have irritant gases, the chemical fumes, tobacco, of course, that is one more major reason for cough. And foreign body in the larynx or bronchi, these are one of the causes. So any foreign body, if you have a child, a mother brings a child with a cough which is of acute onset, a dry kind of cough with desire to expel, first rule out a foreign body. So it could be a 25 paise coin, or it could be a small piece of rubber, it could be a pencil, small part of a pencil. These are the things children generally tend to ingest, and they inhale it invariably. So, and the postnasal drip in chronic sinusitis. This is a very, very common cause of mechanical irritation. Then, of course, the other less known causes are pulmonary edema, then irritation of the pleura like pleurisy and pleuritis, and the reflux part of the cough, which happens in gastroesophageal reflux disease. It can happen in hiatus hernia. This is very common. Thermal stimulus. Now, some people have very strong allergens to either allergies to very cold climate or very hot climate, and that's how the cough can get induced. Habit cough, habitual cough can also happen. Some people, even after the infection is over, post-infective cough, after the infection is over, they continue to have this chronic lingering cough. Then it becomes a kind of a habitual cough. There's the last one known as the psychogenic cough. Now, this is something that is last on the list, and when everything else has been ruled out, all the pathologies have been ruled out, all the morbidities have been ruled out. This is the part of the differential diagnosis. And a lot of people have these nervous, irritating coughs which continue for weeks together, for months together. And especially for homeopaths, we know how important that is, because we believe that there has to be a psychological trigger to many factors, many problems which do not get better over the long run. And especially in chronic problems, a chronic cough, we'll try and get to the root of it. We take the entire history, make sure that constitutional prescribing is done, and only then the cough will go. So once all the morbidities and all the pathologies have been ruled out, the obvious pathologies have been ruled out, then this is one of the causes of cough, and that is psychogenic cough. Now, you may not have a pure psychogenic cough. Very often, psychogenic cough can coexist with the other factors. For example, you have a patient of chronic bronchitis. Now, patient may start getting better, but because they are so used to it, a woman who maybe is neglected by her family, an asthmatic patient neglected by her family, but when she starts coughing, she gets attention from people. So even if she is a known case of bronchitis, the cough that she is presenting might be a little disproportionate to her pathology. So here we know that there is some element of psychogenic part which has been inculcated into the pathology. So psychogenic cough can exist with the other issues as well. So these are the common causes of cough. And of course, the risk factors we know is smoking is one of the biggest factors. And we know the smoker's cough So smoking and even tobacco chewing, inhalation, these are the factors which is the most common factor for coughs. Occupational history, we know that we have to, whenever a patient comes with a chronic cough, it is very important to find out which surrounding, which environment he's living in. So environmental factors, situational factors are very, very important in determining the kind of quality of cough that a patient is coming with. And that may actually help you to know which direction the patient is going, how much of pathology is involved, and how much the environment is responsible for his cough. And of course, allergies, we know that atopies are there. There are patients with strong genetic history or strong hereditary factors of either bronchial asthma or atopy, allergic rhinitis, hay fever. These are some of the common causes of allergies. And of course, biggest risk factor, patient with who has been in contact with a TB patient. So in the individual who has been living with somebody who is an active case of tuberculosis is most likely to develop this kind of cough. So this is something that we need to rule out, all these risk factors, when a patient comes to you, presents to you with cough. Next one. Yeah, so how do you classify a cough? The cough is generally classified. I mean, this is the way you first have to remember that we have to understand the pathophysiology of cough before we go on to the homeopathic treatment. Because homeopathy, although we know that there is nothing morbid, I mean, Hahnemann himself has said that there is nothing morbid that will not be expressed through signs and symptoms. Yet, unless we know the pathology, unless we can sift the normal from the abnormal, we will not know which direction we are heading. So it is very important to understand the broad pathology of a cough, how it presents, what is the classification, what is the character of the cough, how long it has been there, the duration of the cough, and what it is doing to the patient, how it is affecting the patients constitutionally. Even that is a very, very important factor. So we classify a cough according to the duration, how long has it been there, and the characteristic of the cough. So quality of the cough, we'll come to that. The quality of the cough could be, as we say, that the duration could go on to the next one. So the duration of the cough can be acute. So acute is just like a couple of weeks, maybe. Anything which lasts less than 2 or 3 weeks is acute. If it goes beyond that, 3 to 8 weeks, it becomes subacute. And beyond 8 weeks in an adult, and beyond 4 weeks in a child, would classify as a chronic cough. So sometimes we have even chronic coughs. You can have a cough which lasts for maybe a couple of weeks or 3 weeks with a short interval when patient seems to be a little ameliorated and it comes on again. But that will still be classified as a chronic cough because the onset and the duration of the cough has been more than 8 weeks. So that's how you would classify a chronic cough. And it is important to know whether it is acute, subacute, or chronic, because then you will know the reasons why it is happening. So acute cough is generally because of a upper respiratory infection or even a lower respiratory infection like pneumonitis or pneumonia, but it has to subside with proper treatment within a couple of weeks. But whereas a chronic cough, a subacute cough, which is a post-infective cough. So after pneumonia, the patient can continue to have cough for several weeks, maybe a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, 4 weeks maybe. And that will be still classified as subacute because it was following the acute infection. So that will be subacute. But a chronic one is the one which actually, like bronchiectasis, and you have chronic lung disease, or you have interstitial lung disease, or you have chronic bronchitis, patient having recurrent cough following the bronchitis. So this, which lasts for more than 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, will go on into a chronic cough. Next one. Yeah, so the differential diagnosis. Now again, in acute cough, you have to see whether it is life-threatening, whether it is non-life-threatening. Life-threatening would be something like a foreign body, like or an acute attack of asthma, like you say the patient goes into status, so that becomes a life-threatening thing, or a very bad cough following a pulmonary embolism, due to a pulmonary embolism, that is absolutely life-threatening. So these are the things, these are the coughs that you must immediately be able to address. And here you'll have to need supportive auxiliary care in such a situation. Patient might have to be rushed to the hospital. He will need to be on oxygen. And this is the kind of cough that we have also seen in COVID in the initial stages. Now, of course, it's changing. The character of cough is changing. But earlier, it used to be that kind of, and it was a life-threatening cough because with it, the oxygen levels were dropping. The patient oxygen saturation used to drop, and the prognosis would suddenly change from very mild to very severe within a few hours or maybe a couple of days. So you must understand what is life-threatening in a cough. So recognize the quality of the cough, recognize its duration, and recognize what it is doing to the patient. And then you'll know whether it is life-threatening or it's non-life-threatening. So non-life-threatening is generally the subacute or the chronic coughs, which are due to chronic bronchitis or recurrent allergic upper respiratory infections or allergies. These are generally the non-life-threatening coughs. And of course, the life-threatening also pulmonary edema is one of the major factors for life-threatening coughs. In children, we have to be more careful because in children, the clinical picture can change in a matter of few hours. So whether it's bronchiolitis, pneumonitis, or whether it is frank pneumonia, or even a child with a wheezing attack, you have to make sure that you have to recognize how toxic the problem the child is, whether you check his pulse, check whether the child, check the respiratory rate, check the movement of the chest, movement of the abdomen, if it is purely abdominal breathing, if the child is weak, cold, not responding, dull, listless, make sure that you get the child admitted to the hospital and start him on bronchodilators and IV fluids. So never take chances with children. An acute cough can become life-threatening within no time. So this is the differential diagnosis of acute cough. Now let us go on to the next one. Yeah. So this is a subacute cough. This subacute and chronic are very generally intermingled within each other. So subacute, it's a very small classification, but that generally happens, as I said, in a post-infective stage. But a chronic cough, in bronchiectasis, in ILD, in patients with lung fibrosis, in in smokers with chronic coughs, in asthmatics, this is something that needs to be addressed in the long run. And this is where homeopathy has a very big role to play. You will see, even in acute cough, of course, but in chronic cough, we have a very, very big role to play because their conventional medicine has very little to offer in terms of chronic cough. So next one. Yeah. So a classification of the cough also can be done according to the characteristics of the cough. That is how it presents, what is the nature of the cough, the pattern of the cough, how it sounds. These are the important things. So the quality of the cough and the timing, that will determine the characteristic, because quality is like whether it is dry, whether it is wet, whether it is productive, non-productive, whooping cough, paroxysmal cough, as we say. These are the and cough related to pulmonary edema. So the quality of the cough has to be determined, and the timing of the cough. The timing of the cough will also indicates its pathology. So whether it's during the day or whether it's during the night. Generally, night coughs are in bronchial asthma, as we see, or even in certain cases of bronchiectasis. And daytime, you can have the pneumonitis, the pneumonia coughs are generally during the day. So infective coughs don't generally differentiate between day and night. But an allergic cough, like a bronchial asthma cough, will generally come on in the night. And for us, it's very important which part of the night, what brings it on, whether it is before sleeping, after sleeping. Our remedies depend a lot on that. We'll come to that shortly. So we've come to the quality and the timing of the cough. Yeah. And very important is whether the cough is dry or unproductive, whether it is wet or productive, whether it's paroxysmal. So dry or unproductive is generally in acute upper respiratory infections. So a cold, and then the child or even the adult will develop a little bit of irritation in the upper passage, will have a dry cough without much of expectoration. A wet or a productive cough comes in the second part of the infection, an upper respiratory or a lower respiratory infection.
Hello, Sujata. Hello. The audio is not getting now. Hello.
Yes, I'm sorry. There's been a small. Am I audible?
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, now it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, fine. So the paroxysmal and then the cough with wheezing. We know that in bronchitis, in acute and chronic bronchitis, the cough generally presents with wheezing. So you can have a chronic bronchitis, a chronic asthma patient presenting with an acute wheezing attack. So the problem is chronic, but the cough is acute. So these people generally have episodic cough problems, and they come with that in particular season, or when they have a specific exposure to an irritating factor. So whether it's the weather, or whether it's food, or whether it's cold water or cold breeze, any of these things could be the triggers. So yes, there is somebody saying, please could you repeat, ma'am? Now what would you want me to repeat? Please throw some light on, okay. Acute cough, you want me to go back to the acute cough slide? Okay, please go back.
Yeah, somebody was asking like that.
Yeah. So we can go back to the acute cough, yes. So acute, as I said, that we can have, there are 3 categories: the life-threatening, the non-life-threatening, and in children, because in children, the demarcation between life-threatening and non-life-threatening is very, very thin. So we have to quickly act on a cough in children. So, but the first 2 categories generally apply to adults. And life-threatening will be what, as I said, in a foreign body, bad pneumonia, acute pneumonia, or acute exacerbation of asthma, as I said, status asthmaticus. So that can get life-threatening, or even acute pericarditis in a cough, a cardiac cough in left ventricular failure. These are life-threatening situations. So this kind of cough, you have to, as a clinician, you must know how to recognize that. So generally, a left ventricular failure cough will present with night aggravation. The patient cannot lie down. He will get up and he's very, very breathless. He cannot, and that cough is generally worse by slightest exertion. The left ventricular cough is worse by slightest exertion. An asthmatic attack cough doesn't really, is not associated with any exertional factors, but they generally have air hunger. They want to go to the window. They need air. They cannot lie down. They want to sit up. They want a fan. Most of the time, this is what it is. Of course, whenever there's a PQRS in that, that's how the homeopathic remedy is then given according to that. And then life-threatening, of non-life-threatening would be, of course, acute bronchitis, or you have upper respiratory infection coughs, or sometimes hypersensitivity to certain things. These are the acute but non-life-threatening coughs. And in children, as I said, bronchiolitis, bronchitis, pneumonitis, these are the kind of infections that will lead to coughs. But whenever it's paroxysmal, it is continuous, and it is making the child dull, listless, and the patient with sunken eyes and abdominal breathing, be sure that this is a bad sign. You have to rush the child to the hospital or to the pediatrician. Make sure the child is nebulized, or if necessary, put on oxygen and given IV fluids. This is very, very important. So of course, we have medicines, we have remedies to so that the child doesn't reach that stage. In fact, I always say that for every child who ends up in the hospital, every child who ends up with a status or with a bad wheezing attack in the hospital, there are 100 children who have benefited with homeopathy and who have not reached the hospital. So we, unfortunately, we don't see the near misses. We always see what has happened. So this is the homeopathy works so subtly, so gently that sometimes people are even suspicious of whether it worked at all. But then when they say that finally, you know, like the patient is completely better, they say, oh, it must have been homeopathy that did it. Okay, this is, by the way, I think we will, because there are a lot of people with queries, but we will have the last half an hour only for question answers. So you can note down your questions and I will be very happy to answer at that time, because we would not want, you know, an obstruction to the PPTs, because there are people who have logged in right from the beginning and it would be unfair if I have to go back again and again. So a few important types of cough with their character, as I said, dry, unproductive, wet, or productive, paroxysmal, and cough with wheezing. Can we go to the next one? Yeah. So of course, I had to mention that the productive cough is generally in bronchitis, in pneumonia, bronchiectasis, and non-productive is in pure wheezing attacks in asthma. In interstitial lung disease, it's always a non-productive cough. In viral infections, very often, like in COVID, the cough is absolutely non-productive. And then in another condition, most of the viral infections, including influenza also, you have a non-productive dry cough. And the nocturnal cough is always in asthma. Asthma generally has a nocturnal cough. All the asthmatics will have a night aggravation. So that's not really a PQRS, you know. So if you know what is common, what is general, you'll be able to know what is then PQRS. Otherwise, every patient will look like arsenic album. So, and of course, the seasonal variations are also there in coughs. Like some people have winter coughs, some have summer coughs, some have spring catarrhs, and some have at the onset of rainy season. especially the hypersensitive individual, and then the allergic rhinitis and sinusitis. So these are the conditions that generally come under the non-threatening kind of coughs. Okay, now we come to the main aspect, and that is the homeopathic perspective. I just skimmed through the pathophysiology because we just must know what are the types of cough. We must know how they develop. We must know the duration of the cough. We must know how long it has been there with the patient and what it is doing to the patient and the character of the cough to determine the pathology. Once we know the pathology, once we have determined, we have made our diagnosis, whether it is bronchitis, bronchiolitis, pneumonia, suspected of course, because we will need to confirm with laboratory diagnosis as well. But once we know that this is the area, it's not upper respiratory, it's lower respiratory, it's with the lung, it's not just with the larynx or the trachea. This much at least every homeopath must know. We must know, see the trick, the best homeopath is the one who knows when not to give homeopathy. Probably there are very few instances where you don't have to give, where homeopathy is not going to work, but there are instances where you need to also consult conventional medicine doctors. And that's where, homeopathy can play a very big role in having a fantastic strike rate as far as cures are concerned. Half our problems, where we don't succeed with the patient is not because homeopathy has failed, but because we have failed, the clinician in us has probably not recognized the severity of the problem or has allowed the problem to linger when, the patient is either in a state where he needs to go to the conventional medicine doctors in an emergency. And that should not happen. So you must know the right time to refer, especially in a cough, because you should know that how long the cough has been there and whether it's something that the patient has been learning to live with and it's not affecting his constitution or his general health. But if it is affecting his general health to a great degree, it's a deep-seated pathology, make sure that you involve the other doctors as well. So the homeopathic perspective is about that. Knowing the diagnosis, understanding the clinical significance, understanding the prognosis of the cough, and then bundle it and keep it aside. Don't allow it to come in the way of your homeopathic prescription. Because if you allow the pathology to determine your remedy, then you're going to be really not making the accurate prescription. You're not going to be arriving at the simillimum. What you will be giving is based on partial totality, on pathological totality. And that has to be done only when, in extreme cases, in advanced pathologies where you're not going to get individual symptoms. But in every other case of coughs are are absolutely made for homeopathy. The kind of response that coughs give to homeopathy is amazing. So this is an area which you must not allow our hold to go at all. So make sure that as homeopaths, this is an area which you can treat completely and totally. So let's look at the homeopathic perspective. Yeah, so generally we would like to, although there is, this will give us a broad outline as how to approach the cough. So depending, as I said, that once you know the diagnosis, once you know how long it has been there, the duration of the cough, the character of the cough, and the quality of the cough, that is going to determine the miasm. And once you know the miasm, so these things run concurrently. See, if you look at the type of pathology and the miasm, they actually run parallel. So if you have upper respiratory allergies, or if you have an acute infection, you have a cough, even the first part, the initial stage of pulmonary tuberculosis will all come under SORA. Let's just go to the next slide. I think that's how it is. Yeah. So miasmatic analysis of cough is SORA. So the initial stage of any infection, when it is either upper respiratory or even lower respiratory, but not so distressing to the patient, when pathology is not advanced, and it may be following some kind of you'll always find in a case of SORA, when the SORA miasm is dominating, you can always draw a cause-effect relationship. Whereas as the disease advances, as the pathology advances, it may not be so clear. But in a soric case, when the miasm is still soric, you can always find a cause-effect relationship. For example, the patient will say, oh, I went out in the rain and that's how I developed cough. Or I had ice cream, which I generally don't have. I had ice cream and that's how I developed a sore throat. Or the mother will say that the child has had a haircut and the wheezing attack started after that. So these are all still in the soric miasm. So where the cause-effect relationship is very evident, it's very easy for you to make the homeopathic picture, draw the homeopathic picture, very easy for you to give the remedy. So this is where, this is at the stage where you would try and target the illness and try to abort the problem at its outset. Especially in children, it's much easier in children. Most of the adults will approach a homeopath in case of cough when it becomes a little generally subacute or chronic, never in the acute state. They'll try and suppress it with the other medication. And the next one is pseudosora. Yeah. So pseudosora is also one of the components of sora itself, but generally in this condition is most of the patients will either come with something which is very deceptively acute. For example, as I said, the acute wheezing attack of a chronic bronchitis patient. And it may appear very innocuous, very simple to look at, but behind that is a much deeper pathology. And so the manifestation, although appears like a soric manifestation, it might be a psychotic, a tubercular, or a syphilitic manifestation behind it. So that's the pseudosora. And then, of course, the psychotic cough, where it's mostly productive. So all the cases of bronchitis, chronic bronchitis, bronchiectasis, interstitial lung disease will go into psychosis. So sometimes the expectoration is there, but patient is not able to expectorate. Or the chronic coughs of smokers also will come under psychosis. And syphilis is the advanced stage, when you have there's pulmonary edema, or there is pericarditis, or bad pleural effusion. So these are the, or even neoplasms. So chronic, when there was cancer is caused leading to chronic coughs, which is not resolving. This is the stage where you know that it's a syphilitic kind of a presentation. Next one. We'll come to that by and by. So if anybody has any questions on that, I'll be very happy to answer. But we have to go to there's a lot of stuff that I'd like to share with you. So I'd rather not dwell on the miasmatic aspect too much, because we have to talk about coughs and the different remedies. So treatment regarding coughs is selection of the homeopathic remedy for cough. What does it depend on? It depends mainly on the causations. What caused it? What was the ailments from? What started the cough? So what generally leads to this kind of cough? So whether it's acute or chronic. So in acute, you will always say, oh, this was the cause, whether it was getting wet in the rain, having ice cream, having a cold drink, having ice drinks, or going out in a dusty atmosphere, or change of weather. These are the causations generally in an acute condition you'll see. But in chronic, there'll be a pattern you will see. The patient will say that this was what happens every year. Every time when the weather changes from warm to rainy, or from warm to humid, or from dry to humid, that is when I start getting my wheezing attacks. And this time I think it is that. So it is based on the past experience of the patient. And he says that this time also I have a wheezing attack. And I assume that it is because of this cause, because I have it every time. Here you need to take the history much more in detail. So causation is very, very important. The character of the cough. Again, as I said, the character, whether it is dry, whether it is wet, whether it is productive, unproductive, type of expectoration. Very, very important, because that is the expectoration factor is given a lot of importance in homeopathy. And of course, the modalities. So what makes it better? What makes it worse? Whether particular seasonal variations are there. There are any peculiar personal variations to this. So sometimes, a patient may say that I never have a problem with ice cream. I can eat as much ice cream as I can. I have no problem with that. I never have any sore throat. But the moment I have water, cold water from the refrigerator, that's when my problem starts in the throat. So this is how, these are the modalities, and these are very peculiar to each patient. And of course, concomitant. So this is something which I think even when there is paucity of PQRS, a concomitant can be your keynote symptom. And that can be your differentiating symptom, and that can actually help you to arrive at the semilimum. So concomitants are extremely important in case taking, whether it is acute, especially in acute prescribing, in subacute prescribing, and where you are taking a short case. So concomitants can actually lead you to the perfect semilimum. Right. Then, yes, so we go on to the next one. Yeah, and like for example, causations can be anything. For us, we give so much importance to anger, a cough arising from anger. So you think of antimatar, you think of colocin, you think of chamomilla, ignatia, staphylos aureus. These are the remedies which come from when there is aggravation from anger. So when a person says that I felt that somebody died in the family and the patient developed this nervous psychogenic cough, think of ignatia. Or a person who has heard, oh, the neighbor has died of COVID and I might also get COVID, and she starts and gets so dull and so scared of this news that he starts coughing. Think of gelsemium. So these are some of the, this is something you can actually target the causation of the cough, and then your remedy is absolutely given to you on a platter. And even lifestyle diseases, for example, people living in very damp surroundings when there is no sun, there is no sunlight, not enough ventilation. Think of Dalkamara, Natrum Sulph. These are the remedies which will always come up. So even all antipsychotic remedies will be indicated in such situations. Or even when there's not enough air, so you think of or not enough ventilation. Nux moschata is also one of the remedies, I think. And then modalities, as I said, modalities are very important. And yeah, the next one is, yeah. Now let us go to the remedies for the cough. Now these are the, now remember one thing, friends, is that you can never say that this is the remedy for cough. Every remedy of Materia Medica is a remedy for cough if it is indicated. But having said that, you know, we have seen that whenever you are into clinical practice, you will see that more often than not, there is a set of remedies, like maybe about 25, 30 remedies, which come up again and again. You know, even though you repertorize the case, you make sure that you have a perfect, well taken case. Even then, you might still see that there are certain remedies which keep coming up. So the remedy which has an affinity for the respiratory tract, the mucus lining of the respiratory tract, a remedy which also covers the character of the cough, the quality of the cough, the symptoms of the patient, and the mental state that he is in. That is your similimum. And more often than not, these are the remedies which will always come up. And for example, why arsenic album, you know, which was thought of by the CCRH, is still the front runner in terms of COVID cough, because it covers the entire pathophysiology of the COVID cough, right from the inflammatory stage of the lung parenchyma to the necrotic stage, because this is something which was promulgated, I think, about a month into when we were into COVID, that it is not the inflammation or the infection, but it is more often the thromboembolic phenomena which is actually causing sudden deaths. So if you look at thrombosis, you know, in lung parenchyma, arsenic album is the front runner. It is the main remedy. And again, necrosis. So there is no remedy which is as effective, as particular in terms of its affinity to the mucus lining of the respiratory and the gastrointestinal tract. So today when we see that the COVID presentation is changing from the respiratory tract to the GI tract, arsenic album continues to be indicated, because even there it has an affinity for the mucus lining of the GI tract. And all the kind of patients that present with vomiting and loose motions, with the kind of fever and the distress, the emotional and the mental distress that patients present with COVID, arsenic album is covering it. So it still remains, so whichever cough that you take, arsenic album is going to come in most of them. And if it covers the entire spectrum of the patient's symptoms, then that can be the remedy. So don't be surprised that, you know, every time you repertorize a case and these are the remedies that come up again and again. So am I going wrong? What about the rare remedies? Am I going wrong in my working? Because these are the, so am I giving specifics? No, you are still giving the constitutional treatment. You're still giving the similimum, but it is covering the entire spectrum. Plus you will see that most of these remedies are very well proven. So that is why they are more often than not indicated. So never feel that your remedy is wrong. If it is indicated, it is, however common it may be, it may still be your right remedy. We often have this feeling that the rarer the problem, the more rare the remedy should be. You will not believe we have treated cancers with belladonna. We have treated acne with thuja. We have treated warts with sulfur. So, you know, homeopath should be that unprejudiced, that open about his prescriptions. So if you slot yourself, you're never going to be a true homeopath. So be open, and if the remedy is there in front of you, if you've taken your symptoms right, your case right, if you've analyzed it right, you've taken the right rubrics, and if you have repertorized your case well, so it doesn't matter if the remedy is common. What does it matter? Even if it's a case of interstitial lung disease, and if you see pulsatilla coming up, wonderful, why not? You might think, oh, why am I not getting laurocerosis? Why am I not getting camphor? Why am I not getting bromium, acid nitricum? These remedies should be coming up. But homeopathic constitutional prescribing is exactly, this is the beauty of homeopathic prescribing, that our remedies are interchangeable. They can be applied anywhere for anything as long as it is the indicated remedy, as long as it is the similimum. So let's go to the remedies for cough, because these should be well versed in the type of cough that these remedies have. So we just go through that. These are the remedies that generally come up in some cough or the other. So if you decide to repertorize, this is an exercise that all of us can do. But when a patient comes with cough, you know, you you start demarcating whether it's a wet cough, a paroxysmal cough. You can make a chart and you can see that these remedies will always come up somewhere or the other. We have done this very often. We have just taken the cough symptoms and we have even taken the entire case and repertorized it. But if then you get the indicated remedy, the similar it will still show up. Even if it's not the first remedy, the second, the third, or maybe the seventh or the eighth, but it will be there in the first 10, no matter how much you try to push it out. So that's called ruling out the remedy. So remedies for cough. Here, this is aconite. We all know aconite is one of the most common and I would say it's one of the most wonderful remedies for cough, because in all acute coughs, think of aconite first. So if it's a dry cough, it starts suddenly with, and it's a distressing cough to the patient, especially in children, in winters or in dry weathers, aconite is the remedy. It's a dry, short cough, generally not a deep or a paroxysmal cough. It's a very dry cough. And you can, here, as I said, it's very easy to find out the cause effect. So in aconite, there'll always be some exposure to a draft of cold air, a draft of dry air. Patient has gone out, child went out to play in the wind or the breeze, came back with this dry cough. Give aconite a couple of doses and you see the difference. And arsenic album, how can we get over this? The world knows us now. The world has finally recognized homeopathy because of arsenic album. We have much to thank arsenic album for. Now, arsenic album can be used in all stages of cough. So whether it's a dry cough, whether it's a wet cough, whether it's paroxysmal, whether it's acute, subacute, chronic, whether it is from acute wheezing with asthma, whether it's chronic asthma, whether it is interstitial lung disease, bronchiectasis, or even pneumonia. And now COVID pneumonia. So arsenic album can cover every spectrum, provided arsenic album, important thing is that the distress, the fear, the anxiety has to be there. That is the association with every case of arsenic album. You cannot have arsenic album patient coughing, sitting in bed very quietly and reading a book. He has to be in extreme distress. That fear of death, fear of impending doom, fear that something going to happen, fear of death, fear of lying down, fear of dark, fear of dying when alone. All these symptoms are generally present when the arsenic patient is coughing. So even if the cough is from an upper respiratory cause, the distress of arsenic will be still there. And that is important because that is the differentiating factor of arsenic. So that is the drug you cannot miss. And these are the factors, they have to be there. An arsenic patient is very thirsty, but he cannot drink water. He'll have only sip some water. This is one more important thing. They're generally very chilly, cannot bear draft. They are generally want to be covered. They'll have a blanket around them. But these are things. I think the mental state of arsenic is very important, no matter which pathology you're treating. So, and you cannot miss it. So that's arsenic album. Belladonna, as we know, again, acute cough. How will you differentiate it? Importantly, they're very flushed face when they cough. They become very, very red. And generally in a child with tonsillar infection or an upper respiratory infection, you see that the palate is red, the face is red and flushed when the child coughs. This is Belladonna. Bryonia cough. Bryonia is one more remedy that has been a lifesaver in COVID. Believe me, the coughs that have been treated by Bryonia would probably put all the nebulizers to shame. It has been that fantastic. And we have found very, very good results. I think a lot of homeopaths will agree with that. Most of the Bryonia cases will complain of a dry cough. Most of them are dry, irritating, distressing cough. The Bryonia cough patient will never want to do anything. They will just want to lie down. They don't want anybody to disturb them. They don't want to do any work. They'll rather be sitting indolent, sitting or lying down completely. They will rather lie down on the side. They also have some kind of chest pain. They'll have a heaviness of the chest and they want to lie down on the side that is affected most of the time. So they will mostly lie on one side, and because that will give them some pressure, some kind of comfort with a pillow underneath, and they will lie in a dark room, quiet, undisturbed, coughing in between, but much better when they lie down, worse when they get up. So this is the Bryonia kind of cough. Very, very useful in pleurisy, pleuritis. One of the leading remedies in pleurisy cough is Bryonia. Even in acute coughs and chronic coughs as well, Bryonia we have treated wonderfully well. In pneumonias also, Bryonia is the remedy. The next one is Carbovegita. Again, Carboveg has been very, very useful in COVID times. More often than not, Carboveg, you will see that the cough is resembles something like as if it's coming from the stomach, as if it's coming from the esophagus. It seems more like a gastritis kind of cough. So with a lot of, they will have some expectoration, but not much. And the cough is again distressing. There is a lot of air hunger. Extremities will be cold. They will want to be fanned. So Carboveg is generally indicated in the second or the third stage of cough. Generally in acute coughs, you will not think of Carboveg. You think of it in the second or the third stage. So in the pneumonitis stage, or even in bronchial asthma, when the patient is really distressed, hands and feet are cold, and the cough is distressing, not stopping, and there is air hunger along with it. Patient wants the window open, wants to be fanned, wants somebody sitting near them, fanning them. This is what is the Carboveg cough. Next is Causticum. Again, a very, very valuable, invaluable remedy. One of the most precious remedies. Again, treating COVID cough. I can't help but mention it because these are the remedies that have come of great use in this particular pandemic. Causticum cough is very dry, but it is very, very pathognomic of in ILDs, in bronchiectasis, and even in laryngitis, upper respiratory coughs, but chronic coughs. Causticum is very useful, very, very dry, hacking cough. Patient will not stop, generally wants to stoop. The Causticum patient will want to stoop and feels better when he stoops, the cough becomes a little less. The Causticum cough patient will always feel that there's something stuck and he's not able to bring out. He feels that there is some kind, there's an obstruction in the throat or in the chest and he's not able to bring out. So he'll cough and cough. It's a hacking kind of cough, but nothing comes out. A very hoarse, metallic kind of cough. That is Causticum for you. Again, you know, you can always, if this is when a patient presents with cough, this is what it is. You may not be able to judge the entire case at that time. So in acute cough or when the patient, even if it's a chronic cough, but patient presents with an acute presentation, you need to take the character of the cough. You must give relief to the patient at that time. And perhaps when you treat the patient at that time, relieve him of his cough, the case will open up further for more further constitutional prescribing. But at that time, if the patient is has a characteristic Causticum cough, you must give it to him, because it's not really the time where you can judge whether the patient is sympathetic, compassionate, because these are the characteristics of a Causticum patient. But you can definitely have this particular characteristic of cough, which is so peculiar of Causticum, and that's where you can give this remedy. The next one will be Chamomilla. I hope we are well in time, and I hope I'm making it interesting for you. So if anybody has any kind of a problem, any query, please put it. We'll try and address it later. So next is Chamomilla. A Chamomilla cough is invariably brought on by anger, by irritation. Even with the cough, the patient has irritation preceding the cough and is irritable even with the cough. So most of them, let's say, they'll blame the cough, they'll blame the situation, and they'll keep complaining and lamenting and shouting and being irritable with everybody around them. So it is a very distressing cough, both for the person who's coughing and for the person who's listening, because there's so much of irritation associated with it. More often than not, it's a upper respiratory cough, Chamomilla. And if this is the picture that presents extreme irritation, anger. Sometimes causative factor is also anger, especially in children, teething children with a bad upper respiratory and lower respiratory cough. Then they have a runny nose, very irritable, hot extremities, head is also very hot, perspiring, want to be carried. Give Chamomilla, they will settle down, they will calm down, and the cough will also become less. So this is Chamomilla for you. Next one is China. Chamomilla, yes. So yes, the next one is China. China has been again very, very useful. We have seen China in patients who present with, this is very recent, I'll give you a case also. A patient, a COVID patient who presented with a gastrointestinal presentation, like loose motions, nausea, no desire to eat, had about 3 or 4 motions, and after that patient became extremely weak and had no appetite, did not just want, were very, very listless, and with this little bit of cough. And the cough was not really as distressing to him, but because of the loose motion, patient was very weak. And it was a completely non-COVID-like presentation. And at that time, but nowadays, fortunately or unfortunately, every patient...
Sujata?
Yes.
Hello? Sorry, yeah? Sorry. There is a request from one of the participants. ask
Yes.
you to become a little bit slower. I think you're a
Slower.
little
Okay.
faster. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. You
that's all.
mean okay? Slow down. Okay. I'll slow
Yeah,
down.
yeah. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll slow down. It's just that we thought that we're running against time. It's we have yeah. So, but am I audible to everybody?
Yeah, yeah, you are audible. You are audible.
I'm audible. Okay.
Yeah.
So yes. Okay. So yeah. So I hope I'll try and now slow down the pace of the presentation so that everybody can keep pace. Okay, so this patient who presented with gastrointestinal symptoms more than the respiratory still had to go for a COVID test, which turned out to be negative. But patient was extremely weak, and that was a little unusual because all he had was 3 or 4 motions and a little bit of dry cough. And then one of the consultants suggested that let's go for an HRCT chest. And the HRCT of the chest showed ground glass opacities bilaterally. And this is when we introduced China, because patient was irritable, patient did not want to talk to anybody, had this little dry cough and extreme prostration after the loose motions, which was enough indication for China. And with China, patient improved so remarkably that even though the COVID test came, the second swab test came positive, by then the patient was almost out of his symptoms and he could be managed very well at home. He did not need to be hospitalized. So this is the China state. I'm just trying to tell you the state of the remedy. So this is the China state. So you have to make sure that the state of the remedy must match that of the patient. The next one is Sina. We know that Sina and Chamomilla, both are children's remedies primarily, but I have given Sina to even adults recently in a woman with a kind of a chronic cough. But irritability is the hallmark of Sina. Capriciousness is the hallmark of Sina. They are never satisfied with anything. They will be never satisfied with your remedy. Everything about their environment irritates them and they will try to change it. But the change also doesn't satisfy them. So this is very typical of Sina. In a child, we have read the Sina picture that a child is never happy with the toys given to him or her. They want to throw and want the next set of toys. But even in adults, you will see that dissatisfied element is there in a Sina patient. And if such a patient comes to you with cough, make sure that Sina is going to see the patient through. Coccus cacti is specific for the smoker's cough, a dry hacking cough, generally seen in even in tuberculosis following patients who have been tobacco smokers, tobacco users for several years. Coccus cacti has helped. I've not used it very often, let me confess, but I've used it in few patients with very good results. But it has to be indicated according to that. And then we have Coniam, Drosera. Drosera is the main remedy for cough. We all know that in whooping coughs and paroxysmal coughs. And sometimes, you may not have whooping as in a classical whooping cough, but a cough which comes with violent presentation, a cough which comes with, which is very deep to hear, a deep kind of a cough, deep sounding cough, with a short interval where there's some kind of a remission. Patient seems to be a little slightly better, and then again comes on the next whoop. So this is the typical whooping cough, which here Drosera helps. And again, important is the time modality for Drosera. It is invariably after midnight. You will generally not have Drosera during the day. So if the cough is this type of a hacking cough with just few seconds of interval where the patient it's a non-cough period, and the patient says that after midnight my cough becomes worse, I've not been able to sleep, Drosera is generally the remedy. And of course, Hepar sulf, where one of the chief remedies for upper respiratory throat infections, where the patient has a feeling that there is a lump inside, very painful to swallow. The patient cannot even swallow his own spit. It is that painful. So they cannot swallow. So only warm water gives them relief. Warm applications, especially warm covering around the head and the neck, gives the Hepar sulf patient relief. Suppurative tonsils, suppurative part of even in lung abscesses, we have got good results with Hepar sulf, but the cough was not subsiding with any other remedy. So Hepar sulf is one of the leading remedies for this kind of cough. And now with this season, Hepar sulf is more often than indicated. Hyoscyamus is one of the leading remedies for the psychogenic cough. Of course, we should not be prejudiced about that because it has helped several pathologies. But generally a nervous, irritating cough in the presence of people, a hyoscyamus patient, because he's basically exhibitionist by nature. So Hyoscyamus cough will subside as soon as he feels that there is very little audience for him. When people leave the room, the cough subsides. When more people enter the room, the Hyoscyamus starts coughing more. So it's more given as a constitutional remedy. Ignatia, again, following grief, some kind of a shock, an emotional setback, Ignatia is the remedy. Ipecac is one of the leading remedies for asthma, for cough. We all know that. But important symptom of Ipecac is that they are always better only by expectoration, and expectoration through vomiting. So they keep having this nausea, feeling that there is something must come out, something must come out. Nothing comes out, but once it comes out, the Ipecac patient will be remarkably ameliorated. They always want the vomit to come out, and with the vomit, especially in a child, we've seen that the Ipecac child will cough, will have a continuous cough, very distressing cough. The moment the child vomits and with it comes out all the mucus, there is instant relief, and that is after giving Ipecac. Kali Carb, again, very, very dry hacking cough, very useful for postnasal catarrhs, and patient will always have a disposition to hawk out. There is something inside the throat, a plug of mucus which the patient wants to bring out. Very useful for senile coughs also. So old people who, especially after the 70s, 75s, have this chronic bronchitis, chronic coughs. So winter catarrhs, and they have this feeling they always want to expectorate. They keep hawking the mucus, which comes out of after a lot of effort. Think of Kali Carb, very, very useful senile remedy. And lachesis, generally when it's an inflammatory kind of onset, the inflammatory causation, they have generally, it's a left-sided remedy, but you will see that there will be pseudomembranes. You will see that there is a purplish kind of, reddish purplish kind of, when as soon as you see the patient's throat, you will see a reddish purplish kind of a membrane there. And that is lachesis for you. It more often than not, it is always worse by any kind of heat. They always have this globus hystericus issue. So they have this feeling that there is something over there which they are not able to swallow. But lachesis is generally very, very hot. They cannot bear any kind of pressure around the neck, any kind of pressure anywhere. Anything. So even if they have a neck piece, they want to remove it. And when they're coughing, it even becomes worse. So that's the lachesis cough for you. We have then lycopodium, Moxol, we have natrum mur, phosphorus. All these are very, very important remedies in cough. The pulsatilla cough, as we all know, that it is very useful in acute as well as chronic condition, but there will always be a free-flowing expectoration. Always a thick yellowish expectoration, easy to bring out. Pulsatilla will always have easy flowing discharges. So whether it is from the nose or from the throat, most of the discharges are yellowish, thick, and easy to bring out. So, but the pulsatilla cough is always better only in open air. They want the windows open. If they go out for a walk in gentle breeze, they are generally much better. All the symptoms, including cough. They are not able to lie down at night. So this is the difference between arsenic album cough and pulsatilla. Both of them have night cough. Pulsatilla will also want to get up and sit to relieve the cough, but they will want the doors and windows open, and mentally they are not that distressed as much as arsenic album are. So that's the difference between pulsatilla and arsenic. Arsenic will also ask for sips of water, which pulsatilla will not. Rumex is one more remedy which has worked very well in this season. Very dry cough, rasping cough, absolutely no discharge, no expectoration, but very distressing, and it's very irritating to hear, as if, I mean, this is what I have personally experienced in a Rumex cough, as if somebody is, crackling paper. That kind of a cough they have, and you'll just want the person to stop because it's so irritating to the ears, the Rumex cough, and it has worked wonderfully in the COVID cough. Sepia is one of the remedies that I'd like to mention. Although many people will not give it for cough, but I found it extremely useful for night coughs. Sorry for that. So, example of a sepia cough. We had this patient walking into our clinic one day, and this man came with his young daughter, about 6 years old. And he did not identify himself, although he was a critical care specialist from one of the leading hospitals in Mumbai. And he did not identify himself. He just said that I walked into your clinic because my child has been suffering from cough for more than 3 months. And I have she's undergone all the investigations. The language that he was speaking, I thought that he knows a lot of medical language, medical lingo. And even then he did not reveal that he was a doctor. But then I took the case. I found that this girl was extremely exhausted. So I asked her, how does the cough make you feel? She said, tired. I'm tired of my cough. And she wasn't looking weak or sick, but she was just looking exhausted, fatigued, and tired. So, and the kind of cough, of course, the modalities of CPR were also there. She was coughing mostly at night, and that the cough was very distressing. The patient wanted to lie down, didn't want to talk to anybody, and nothing would give her relief. Even lying down wouldn't give her relief, sitting wouldn't give her relief. And she didn't want anybody around her. Even her father, she didn't want, who she was very close to. And in fact, she didn't want him around at all. And just based on that, we gave her CPR. So remember that CPR at whatever stage, whether it's for cough, whether it is for gynec complaints, whether you give it for a backache, the CPR state is patient is always in a tired state, fed up state. Okay, this far and no further. I think I don't want anything now. I don't want any more treatment. Nothing is helping me. So they are not prostrated like the arsenic patient. They are not angry like the chamomilla patient or the Nux vomica patient or the colicin patient. And nor are they violent like the staph aureus patient. But they are fatigued. They are just tired. They're just fed up. And that is one of the absolute peculiarities of the CPR cough. A tired cough. They've been coughing, and now it's so tired that they're too tired to even cough. They're not weak. The sternum metallicum is like that. That he coughs and he has a weak chest after that. So he holds his chest because he's so weak. So that's the sternum metallicum cough. But the CPR cough is not like that. It doesn't make the child weak. It makes the child tired. It makes the person tired. And it was a very unusual prescription. And we just gave one dose of CPR 200 at that time, I recollect. And we didn't hear from the patient at all. And it was a little unusual because we had called the patient after a week for a follow-up and there was no report at all. So just out of curiosity, we thought perhaps they had to admit the child, or maybe, you know, there's some other investigation that they underwent, and then that is, they must have found out something else. There was a deeper pathology to it. And we called up and there was no response. After 2 weeks, the father called up and said, I'm really sorry for this, but I'm a critical care specialist from so-and-so hospital. And I didn't identify myself because I myself was so fed up with all the treatments that she was undergoing. She had a history of recurrent bronchitis, atopic in nature, and we keep giving her nebulizers. We have given her oral steroids, and even after that, she wasn't responding with her cough. And that is what made me so distressed and so tired that I just dialed numbers and I found out who's the homeopath next to my residence. And I just walked into your clinic. And I just wanted to know how you deal with patients. And when you gave the dose, that's the night when my daughter slept very well. So I thought there must be some steroid in the remedy that you gave. So I thought I have to wait and watch, because if it was a steroid, after a few days, there'll be a recurrence. But there was no recurrence even after 2 weeks. So I know that your homeopathy helped, and I know that it contained no steroids. So I think that was the best validation. So when you hit the bullseye, when you know that you've given the remedy on the right indications, then homeopathy seems to work like magic. We know it's not magic. We know it's mathematics. We know it's science, and we know it's absolutely rational. It's not just magic. Magic is something which is it's an unfair term to attach to homeopaths, because magic cannot be replicated. Magic is not scientific. We are not magicians. We are scientific doctors. We work on rational. We work on this beautiful system of homeopathy, which is absolutely logical, which is absolutely wonderful if you know how to work on it, if you know the protocol that has to be followed before you give the simillimum. So this is one of the remedies, CPR, and then there are several other remedies, but these are just some of the indications that I gave you. I would like to throw open the session for question answers, because that will make it more interesting. I'll know what problems you people are facing, or what you'd like to know more from the session. Yes. Any questions?
Hi, Sujata.
Yes, hi.
Let me point out some questions.
Yes.
We're asking about the conium cough. Conium cough.
Yes. You want to know about the, see, conium cough, I have seen mostly conium, I have, this personally I have treated conium coughs in one of a case of bronchogenic carcinoma. And conium cough arises generally out of some kind of an obstructive pathology. It's a very deep acting remedy. And it's a very deep, rasping kind of a cough, as if there is something stuck inside. And invariably, the patient is extremely weak. A conium patient will always have a lot of prostration. That is what I have seen. I've treated 2 cases of bronchogenic carcinoma where patient has got good symptomatic relief with conium. This is my personal experience with conium, although I haven't used it very often routinely in coughs. It is mostly,
Okay.
yes.
You
Yes.
finished, right? Yeah. So
Yeah,
the other
yeah.
one is regarding the cause. Somebody asked, like, my friend had, so I got it. I think it's regarding the cough. So because maybe she's trying to explain that is by Deepa. My friend has got a cough, so I got. My brother had a cough and I got. So how to take the causation? How to take the causation? That's what she meant, I think.
No, I would like that. Is that question on the wall? So I can see it.
Yeah. It's on the chat.
It's on the chat. Okay.
Yeah, she's asking, like, I think regarding the causation of the cough.
Causation of the cough. Okay. Which
Yeah.
cough is she asking about?
No. She's asking as general, I think, because she's asking, like, my friend had a cough. She didn't mention about the cough. I'm thinking like that. My friend had a cough, so I got it. My brother had a cough, I got it. So how to take the causation? That's what she's asking.
Okay. You mean contacts through the.
Yeah. That's
That's
infective.
obviously an infective cough. So if you catch it from somebody, it is obviously an infective. So the causation is either an upper respiratory infection, more likely to be an upper respiratory infection. And in COVID times, you will always first check whether you have the patient test for COVID-19 positive. So this is one of the ways you can test the patient. But more often than not, if you catch it from somebody, it's very likely to be an infective cough. So that's the causation, and that's an acute infection mostly. Unless you've been in contact with the patient for very long, the patient is an active case of pulmonary tuberculosis, then it's another thing. But otherwise, more often than not, it's an upper respiratory infection. Yeah, there is somebody who's saying.
Okay. Again, the one thing is causticum cough. Causticum.
Yeah, causticum cough. Yes. I think I did mention that in detail, but I will repeat that. The causticum cough is generally a metallic cough, a very distressing, continuous cough. The patient tries to bring out something. He feels that there is something stuck inside. He wants to bring it out and nothing is coming out. This is what is the causticum cough. And even after trying to expel, nothing comes out. So with the cough, he bends forward, he stoops, and stooping gives him relief. That is invariably a causticum modality. But it is only stooping that gives the causticum patient relief. And it's a very dry, hacking kind of cough. Is not relieved by anything and wants to drink only cold water. That is also one of the hallmarks of causticum. Wants to drink cold water, which gives some relief, temporary relief to the patient. Yeah.
Okay. Another one is China.
Yes, somebody is asking about the China cough. This also I mentioned is that China cough is generally following some kind of a, some kind of a discharge, some kind of a hemorrhage, some kind of a loss of body fluid after that. So the patient, as I explained the case where the patient presented with a loose motions and there was a little bit of cough, but there was a lot of irritation in the patient and extreme weakness and prostration. So weakness, prostration, irritability, taciturn, does not want to talk to anybody, and a dry cough. That is the hallmark of China. And they are so weak and so prostrated, they want to lie down. And you will see that in a lot of patients who are anemic. We have seen that in patients who are chronically anemic, especially the thalassemia trait people are chronically anemic, and when they develop a cough, it doesn't go away quickly. So that's where China can also help. Yes.
Okay. Another one is Squilla.
Squilla, yes. Yes, Squilla is also a very good remedy for cough. We've used it in children very often. And children generally who present with coryza and cough together. So they have the upper respiratory infection and they present with watery nose, running nose, very distressing. And the cough also continues. The child is rubbing its nose, very irritable. And you can think of Squilla in such a case because, if you realize that in a lot of children who develop measles, post-measles, they develop this kind of cough. Antimony tartar is one of the remedies for that. You have Merck Sol, you have Pulsatilla, but Squilla is something you can always keep in mind, especially if coryza is associated with the cough. Yeah.
Okay,
See,
there is one question regarding the phosphorus cough. Phosphorus.
yeah, yeah. So phosphorus cough is also very violent. Remember that phosphorus is it's a very volatile, inflammable substance. So everything that is associated with phosphorus is also like that. This is in the acute stage. In the chronic stage, in the bronchiectasis and then the interstitial lung disease, there'll be very low vitality. Phosphorus will present with very low vitality. They have intense craving for cold water. Even in acute cough, the phosphorus patient will want ice cream, cold water, because with the cough they have nausea, they want to bring it out, but nothing comes out. But when they have ice cream or they have cold drinks, then they will sweet cold drinks. They always want something sweet and cold. And when they eat or drink that, it gives them temporary relief from the cough. It gives them temporary relief from the vomiting associated with the cough. So that is phosphorus. Very, very useful remedy in all stages of cough, because it's a very deep acting remedy and it's a very well proven remedy in Materia Medica. Somebody is asking about Justicia. Justicia, yeah, Justicia is also one of the remedies. It's a very short acting remedy, a very specific remedy for upper respiratory tract allergies especially. And here sneezing is the hallmark. So a patient who first begins with sneezing, violent sneezing is the hallmark of Justicia, if I remember right. And the patient will go on sneezing, and then that's how he will develop cough later on. So a second stage of the upper respiratory tract infection is the cough, and that's where Justicia may help if there has been a history of violent sneezing and coryza to begin with. A case of dryness.
Okay, somebody was asking about the treatment of tuberculosis with homeopathy. I think that's a very important point. Treatment of tuberculosis.
Yes, very, very important point. Yes, Vineet. And when you mention cough, you always think of tuberculosis, pulmonary tuberculosis. And if suppose a patient comes to you with cough, he has not been diagnosed with tuberculosis, and you are the one who diagnoses him, because his cough has been long-standing. There might be blood-stained sputum. The patient has been wasting, losing weight. There might be a little bit of fever associated with. So these are all the classical symptoms and signs of tuberculosis. So you will ask for an X-ray, and invariably you will see a cavity. So what will you do now? So the patient says that, doctor, the medicine that you gave me, probably you have given him, either you've given him Causticum or Spongia or Rumex or Pulsatilla, depending on his constitution, whatever you gave him, or even arsenic album, that has helped him symptomatically. He says that, doctor, with your medicine, I'm much better. So even if it is tuberculosis, I want you to treat me. I don't want to go to the allopath, because I've heard such horror stories of the medicines and they cause such side effects. So I don't want to go there. So what will you do in such a situation? Will you continue to treat the patient because he's feeling better with your treatment, or will you refer him to the allopath? So my personal opinion here is that no matter what, because tuberculosis is a highly, highly pathological condition, and by default, because it's a very well laid out regimen in allopathy, the patient must take the AKT, because it's not just about the patient getting symptomatically better, or even if you can help him with his tuberculosis. It's not that we are only giving through symptoms, we are also helping the patient constitutionally agreed. But the pathology is so advanced and so deep in pulmonary tuberculosis that it can eat away the patient's lungs. And it can also make the patient, the others around him, susceptible to the tuberculosis. So contacts also come under the weather because of him. So in such a condition, I would suggest that you allow the patient to take conventional medicine, rather encourage him to go for conventional medicine, and simultaneously keep giving homeopathy through the whole treatment. Having said that, nowadays, there are patients who are not responding to the conventional treatment because of resistance. So you have so much of multi-drug resistance now that patients are not even responding to the typical rifampicin, isoniazid, and the ethambutol combination. So they have to keep juggling with the remedies. This is the time that homeopathy you can actually give him the constitutional remedy and allow the conventional medicine to act better. This has been our experience, is that in multi-MDR tuberculosis, the right homeopathic remedy introduced at the right time will help the conventional medicine to act better and reduce the resistance to the treatment. And the patient responds so beautifully, so favorably, that even with the minimum of dose, with the standard regimen, he's out of it in no time. So this is a very, very personal opinion. I mean, I would love to, I would wait for the day when homeopathy becomes a primary treatment protocol for tuberculosis. But it's a bacterial infection and we must be careful. And India still, it is very, very rampant. We cannot afford to have TB patients around us. We have to eradicate this as fast as possible. So this is my personal opinion, but at whatever stage of the disease, homeopathy still has a role to play. Yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Someone was asking about the potency you are using.
Yeah, potency, most of the cases we see that when a patient presents with only cough, now because today we are talking about cough and we are treating the patient based on the presenting totality, we would go with a safe potency, a moderate potency like 30C with few repetitions sometimes, not totally, not too many, but few repetitions. But when you are hitting the bullseye, remember the thumb rule is that closer you get to the similimum, where subjective symptoms are predominant, and you have the entire case totality in your hand, and you are very sure that this is the similimum, do not be afraid, give a high potency, but no repetition, just one single dose. And that's how we deal with the cases. So acute cases, subacute cases, presenting totality or short acute totality, you can give the remedy in 30C potency. I don't generally give it below that, 12C to 30C. Few repetitions, not too many, but few repetitions. And higher the subjective, like higher the level you go to, the more symptoms that you get and the more rounded the cases, you can be sure that your similimum will work and you give the patient just one dose of the highest potency that you can give. Generally, 1000 potency is more than enough. Yes, somebody is asking whether arsenic album, can I get that question?
Yeah, arsenic album could be given in the form of inhalation.
In the form of inhalation. Yes, there have been, we have tried to do that. In fact, very good question. That's an amazing question. For arsenic album, any homeopathic remedy can be given through inhalation. I'm talking about cough. So if the patient needs to be nebulized, we've tried this actually. I've tried this in nebulized cases. Instead of putting the bronchodilator inside, along with the distilled water, you put maybe half a vial of arsenic album 30, or you can put half a vial of antimony tart, depending on whatever is indicated remedy. So if it is antimony tart, you put antimony tart in that and allow the person to inhale that. And it really works because see, finally, homeopathic medicines are absorbed through the mucosa. So if it is through the nasal mucosa, wonderful. I think it will act instantly and wonderfully. So we could actually make this a protocol. We could try and maybe if we have more large scale studies on this, and we can actually make an observational data, collect some observational data on this. That in asthmatics, if the indicated remedy is given through the nebulizer, will it act? Very, very relevant question. And we have seen results with that. But of course, if the patient is able to take it orally, why would you give it through nebulization? It's only in patients like now who are on mask ventilators or who are on, who have a Ryle's tube and who have an oxygen catheter inside, probably for them. But otherwise, if the patient is able to take it orally, there's no reason why we would want to put it in the nebulizer. Yeah, so anything else?
Somebody was asking regarding the dose for nebulizer.
Yeah, dose for nebulizer, we don't have any, see, because homeopathy is quantitative treatment. So approximately you would, whatever you will give orally. So I said, say maybe half a vial of the dilution. So if you have a 1 gram bottle, maybe 1/4 of that, because you need to match the proportion of distilled water. So maybe half a vial of that you could add and give. You could try this, there's no harm done at all. Next one.
How can we give our medicine highly set?
Pardon?
Yeah, someone was asking regarding the administration of medicine in highly sensitive patients or idiosyncratic patients. I think he may be asking regarding the potency or repetition or something like that.
Yes, so even I really have not come across patients who are hypersensitive to a particular potency. Very, very rare. I mean, in my 30 years of practice, I've not had a single patient who has where we thought that, okay, it was the potency which was a problem and we had to change the potency for the patient to get less sensitive. More often than not, these are anecdotal. The potency from 30 to 200 C are very safe. You would never have a problem. You don't even have to go to the 1000 potency very often. So 30 C, I think, is the safest one, and that should be a standardized potency for most of the prescriptions. So even in the COVID protocol, we have seen that 30 C has been recommended by the CCRH also in all their protocol literature.
Yeah, someone has been asking regarding the cough related with the gastroesophageal reflux.
Yes.
GERD. Yep.
So, yeah, so this is also, as I said, in the subacute and the chronic conditions, GERD is a very common condition. So, you know, the patient say that because of acidity, I have this cough. And a lot of people have that because of reflux esophagitis. And the remedies here commonly would be, again, arsenic album, carbo-veg is there, pulsatilla is there. Lycopodium is one of the remedies where even hiatus hernia patients are respond very well to lycopodium. Nux vomica is there. Again, you have to remember that the peculiar modalities, the concomitants and the characteristics of the remedy have to be there. So I cannot say that if this is GERD, this is the remedy. There'll be but these are the remedies that generally work. This is a range of remedies from which you would generally find your remedy when you get a patient of GERD with a typical cough. So most often than not, these are the Kali carb is also one of the good remedies for that. Yes, next one. I just saw one question. Yeah, chronic dry cough, but lungs are clinically clean.
Yep.
Okay. So then it is, then it's not a lung, it's not a deep-seated cough. It's more often either it's a laryngeal cough, it's a pharyngeal cough, it's a GERD issue, but it could be a laryngitis, chronic laryngitis. It could be a smoker's cough, or it could be a post-nasal drip, you know, like the patients with chronic sinusitis. They may be having that, but generally that would be like, it is dry, but they would want to bring out something. So a chronic cough, which is not, the lungs are clean, so even it doesn't have to be a very severe pathology. We have seen a lot of patients with chronic coughs having no lung pathologies at all. Yes, there is somebody, there's one more question. Yeah, cough after antibiotics. Yeah, we know that iatrogenic reasons for cough are there. Most of the allopathic medicine, especially ACE inhibitors, and that's what I think, ACE inhibitors, atenolol, and aspirin, I think. These are the drugs which can induce coughs and which are sometimes responsible for these allergic coughs. Antibiotics also to some extent, but I wouldn't say that they're directly responsible cough. Several antibiotics, including antihelminthics, also metronidazole, then even ofloxacin. You have several of these cephalosporins. They cause augmentin is one of the remedies which, one of the drugs which can cause severe gastroesophageal reflux. And that can be the reason for cough. So they're not directly inducing cough, but because of the gastritis associated with the side effect of the remedy, that could be the cough that might come on after that. Yes, cough after TB get cured. Then also having, oh, you mean that the tuberculosis is cured, but the cough is lingering. I assume that is right.
I think so.
So yeah, this is a very common thing, and here homeopathy can really play a good role. We have done this with a few of our patients. With even after tuberculosis was cured, the cough still remains. In fact, a lot of people complain of cough following tuberculosis after the AKT is over. So again, there you have to take the totality. But again, very often than not, we have seen that causticum helps in such cases. Pulsatilla is one of the remedies. Sulfur sometimes can help. Just a single dose of sulfur may help. The patient is absolutely fine and is a hot patient, has an irritating cough, also has a bit of gastritis because of the drugs. You can still give sulfur. One dose can actually help the cough in its, stop the cough in its tracks. But pulsatilla, lycopodium, then antimonitat, not antimonitat, I think it is spongia. Spongia is one of the remedies for post-tuberculosis coughs. Yes, there's one more question. Yeah, what precautions need to be taken? I didn't get this. What's the whole question? Can you read the entire question, please?
Yeah, that's regarding the precautions need to be taken homeopathically in those with past history of cured TB. There is, I think, there is no need to take any precautions because the past
yeah, I mean the general precaution that you would take for any infection, obviously. Yeah. But homeopathically, unless remember always is that you never treat pathology. You will always treat the patient. So if the patient approaches you that I have taken the entire AKT, but I'm not well, that is when you will treat him homeopathically. But if the patient has nothing, and you will not give something just to take care, okay, now the AKT is over, this is where homeopathy comes in. That's now not how homeopathy is supposed to act. homeopathy will treat the suffering. So the patient has to be complaining of something, has to have some symptoms. That's why that's where
Treat the patient.
Exactly, that's right.
Yeah, not the tuberculosis. Treat the patient.
Not the tuberculosis. Absolutely right. Yes. Yes, Father Prince.
I think
Yes.
we can wind up because it's like 10 o'clock.
Yes, correct. Yes, it could just go on and on. This is yes, somebody just said about tuberculum and bacillinum. Yeah, they are good anti-miasmatic remedies, good specific remedy also. Bacillinum is excellent in AKT patients completed the entire tuberculosis treatment, but then end up with some fungal infection because the immunity, the susceptibility has to show itself. So there'll be some level, there'll be some expression at a dermatological level. So if you give a dose of bacillinum, probably that might just help in kickstarting the cure for the fungal dose. Right.
So I think we can conclude this. Thank you, Sujata.
Yes.
Thank you for the nice session.
Thank you.
I think Dr. Vinodini can have a word of thanks.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Vinodini. Yeah, please carry on.
Yes. Ma'am, thank you so much, ma'am. It was a wonderful session, ma'am.
Thank you, Vinodini.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Please, ma'am.
Yes, thank you all. It's been a wonderful, receptive participants. I can see that there was a very large number of people, and I'm very grateful to the IHMA for this lovely opportunity. It was like talking to my friends. Amazing. Thanks, Vineet, for being there. The comfort level was definitely good because you were around. And I'm looking forward to more such sessions with the IHMA. Great going. Keep it up. Good night, all friends. Look forward to seeing you. You can post on my personal, you can message me, or even through the IHMA if you have any queries, if you have any problems or any criticisms, even those you can post, and I'll be happy to change whatever I can. Thank you very much. Good night. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you, Sujata. Bye. Good night. Take care. Bye. Bye all.